Despite controversy around the benefits of Nigeria joining and signing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has said that the new trade agreement will boost the country's exports by 8%. Our business correspondent, Irene Ubani, spoke to the head of research, Augusto, and Jimmy Ogbonine on this and more.
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has been in the news for a while. What is your take on it?
It's been an interesting conversation. It's also been very controversial. You've had the pros and the cons. And initially, those who were opposed and against it seemed to have their way. When sometime last year, when the president was on his way to Rwanda to sign it, the trip was controversially called off. And then this time around, Nigeria took its time, read the agreement, studied it, and then we've gone into it, we've signed it. Firstly, I would like to say that at Augusto and Co, our position is that we support it, principally because of one reason. The world has not gone poorer as a result of free trade agreements. Free trade agreement has only led to greater prosperity across the globe than increased poverty, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the EU. Free trade only increases prosperity rather than poverty because it opens markets up and it increases competition. And when you stimulate competition in any economy, you only grow the pie rather than restrict the pie or constrict the pie. So for Nigeria, for instance, now, with the largest market in Africa, either by geography, either by population or by GDP size, and we've been quite nervous and we've not behaved like a giant, so to say, in all of these. We've been quite nervous around the possibilities of what the free trade agreement would bring. But I would dare say that we'll be better off for it. Because if you look at 95% of our export earnings comes from oil, which means that only 5% comes from non-oil. And what this free trade agreement does is that it opens up an export market to us. Okay. Some would argue that it also opens us up as an import market from the rest of Africa. Yeah, yes, that's true. But who does free trade hurt? So you can export and they can also import to you. So it's a game plan. And you have to learn to compete, basically. So there's no doubt about the fact that we would have to learn to compete.
How ready do you think we are for such competition? At least to be at the winning end?
If you look at it from the infrastructural side of things, we would never be ready. We'll probably not even be ready in a century's time. So we have to force readiness, basically. We have to force readiness because the world won't wait for anybody. The world will not wait for Nigeria. So Nigeria, if this is a way to force readiness, then so be it.
Taking a cue from what you just said in terms of forced readiness, should we depend on the government to push to be ready for this agreement and being on the winning end?
I'm not sure the government can do much because if the government could, they would have done so much since 1960. So I'm not sure the government can really do more. But if you look at the first wave of companies who came into Nigeria after independence, whether it's the Nestle's, the Nigerian breweries, the Nigerian bottling companies, the Coca-Colas and the rest of them, and Cadbury's, they came into Nigeria as trading outposts. So they considered Nigeria as a trading outpost where they were basically trading their goods in Nigeria. And as they increased trading in Nigeria, as they found Nigeria to be a good market, they increased from trading, they diversified into manufacturing. So they became trading and manufacturing companies. And then following the petrol boom of the 70s, they now started listing on our stock exchange. So there has always been an evolution. That's how you attract investments into your country. And as these investments yield in your country, and as these investors take deeper roots in your country, then they have greater faith in your economy to plant their roots here and, set a wider footprint.
All right, and finally, the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, mentioned that this agreement will bring about 8% increase in terms of our exports. What's your take on this?
Yes, so he's looking at it from the non-oil exports. So, like I said, while we've been very nervous about competing with the rest of Africa because we were overwhelmed with our hard infrastructure issues. The reality is that much of Africa really doesn't have much to, a wider swath of Africa doesn't have much to offer Nigeria in terms of goods. So I think the 8% export target, in my estimation, is quite unambitious. We should actually look at increasing that target budget. In terms of the non-oil exports, I think we should actually target much more than that, than the 8%. Yes.